We appreciate all of you joining us tonight, and thank you for joining us so late for some of you. I know it's 9 o'clock for some of you. We are grateful that you can be here. And welcome. Welcome. My name is Maria Elena Perales, and I am the director for the St. Joseph Justice Center. On behalf of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange, I welcome you to our third virtual session of this year's Summer Public Witness. According to the Harvard Business Review, immigrant populations power economies and enrich cultures, as we all know. 3 ways in which immigrants enhance U.S. power is through labor, military service, and innovation. Each wave of immigrants, from the huddled European masses to newer arrivals from Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere, have been willing to take on its work its predecessors no longer will take. Thus, jobs are not stolen. Rather, output increases for U.S. states. Immigration growth and GDP move in tandem. In addition, immigrants and their children account for 26% of the U.S. population. And studies show that they have changed local economies, communities, and politics for the better. Therefore, it is argued that developed countries should not shun newcomers, but welcome them to build a diverse and enriched community and ensure a national prosperity. So tonight, we welcome Sister Deirdre Griffin, who will share about her ministry of welcoming the migrant. Welcome the immigrants, the refugees, the asylum seekers. I now pass it on to Alice Soto, a member of our Social Justice Committee, to lead us into prayer.
First, let us take a moment to be in God's loving presence. At times, Joseph, like so many, was a refugee without home, welcome, or work. So what he could do, he did. It made all the difference.
Thank you, Alice, for this beautiful reflection. And now I'd like to introduce to you Sister Deirdre Griffin, as she's a sister of St. Joseph of Springfield, Massachusetts. She grew up near Boston and is the child of Irish immigrant parents. For the past 25 years, Sister Deirdre has practiced immigration law, run a food pantry, managed court interpreters, and directed a refugee resettlement program. She is currently in ministry at the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, Texas, on the border of Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, with the Maryknoll lay missioners. There she accompanies people who have crossed the border in El Paso and are currently guests at Annunciation House Shelter. She works with Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center to bring legal orientation information and limited legal services to asylum seekers at the shelter. In collaboration with Annunciation House volunteers, she provides a warm welcome and support to some of our most vulnerable sisters and brothers, all of whom have survived terrible violence and are then further traumatized by the U.S. detention and immigration legal systems. So now I invite Sister Deirdre to share her story.
Thank you very much, Sister Sue, for the introduction, and to all of you for this invitation. It's nourishing for me too to be in this space. So I appreciate the opportunity to share. The network of hospitality in this cross-border community of El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, is a living weaving for me. An experience of the lace making in the neighborhood of our first Sisters of St. Joseph in Le Puy, France. There are more threads and bobbins than I can name, including shelters, churches, community organizations, Border Patrol agents, medical providers, counselors, long and short-term volunteers, to name just a few. And so each day is a challenging and humbling invitation to trust that it is enough to do my very limited part to help in this border threshold space where there is so much trauma and pain, and thank God, even more grace, much of which arises from the faith and the goodwill of the people seeking welcome here. I'm here with Maryknoll lay missioners, and thanks to their support, I have the flexibility to be present to unmet needs without having to worry about being hired by any particular organization. There are very limited immigration legal services available in El Paso. And when I arrived in January 2022, it quickly became evident that folks being released from immigration legal detention centers to the shelters coordinated by Annunciation House had no chance at all of accessing legal services during their stay. Since then, I've been honored to serve as a connection between Annunciation House and Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center to bring limited legal services to the shelters. At that time, most people were intending to move along within a few days or a week to join family and friends in other parts of the United States. The need was to help them understand the complexity of the legal processes in which they have landed, that they have to follow up with appointments at both immigration court and with ICE, Customs Enforcement, in order to keep their legal case active. They also needed an orientation to what asylum is, how to file an application, and how to tell their story to a judge in a way that aligns with the legal construct of asylum, which, as you may already know, is an international right, also enacted in US law, to request protection from the government of another country if you suffered persecution in your home country or have a well-founded fear of persecution if forced to return there. Since I arrived, the demographics have shifted multiple times, but the legal needs remain the same. Most recently, with people continuing to arrive from Venezuela, the shelters have adapted to allow for longer-term stays for families who do not have family or friends in the United States. The lack of a national plan to welcome people has created very difficult conditions in our larger cities. So to the extent possible, families are being allowed to stay in El Paso until they can come up with a plan and are able to collect enough money to be able to travel. Part of the heaviness of orientation is helping people understand that the state of Texas is aggressively inhospitable to people on the move. Immigration judges here have a long-standing reputation of a low rate of approval for asylum cases, and the state legislature has recently passed laws making it a state crime to be present in the state of Texas without legal status, as well as attempting to criminalize the actions of those of us who offer hospitality and other support to people seeking asylum. These state laws are being challenged in the courts and are currently on hold from being put into effect until those cases are decided. It's important to note that the vast majority of people welcomed at Annunciation House shelters are brought there by the federal government from immigration detention centers. They are in immigration proceedings and have permission to be in the United States while their immigration case is heard. The very small number of people who are not in deportation proceedings already have been brought to the shelters directly from local hospitals, where they've received treatment for injuries sustained by coming over the wall, or through the ever-increasing barriers of razor wire along the banks of the US side of the Rio Grande, or because they have been badly injured in Ciudad Juarez and brought to emergency rooms in El Paso by ambulance because the Mexican government refuses to help them. It's important for us to prioritize filing the asylum claims of these guests so that they too are in a legal process and have permission to be in the United States. The extreme and insidious nature of the violence people have endured, both in their home countries and along the journey to the border, have markedly increased, even during my 2 years here. Every family I meet with has been extorted, beaten, kidnapped, and/or sexually assaulted along their journey. The violence in Mexico, perpetrated by the cartels and by the government, is horrific and is exacerbated by current US policy restricting access to requesting asylum, and by US externalization of the border by paying the Mexican government to do whatever it takes to deter people. Many people now share with me that the experience of coming across Mexico is far more dangerous than their passage through the jungle of the Darien Gap. Clearly, deterrence is not now and never has been an effective strategy. It is a politically fueled illusion. If people had other options, they would not put themselves through this. I share this with you because it's important for all of us to know and to continue to learn more about the interconnectedness of these horrors. The history of United States involvement in Latin America over the past 70 years, the unfettered flow of guns from the United States into Mexico, and the absence of a process for requesting refugee status through the United Nations closer to home are all deeply embedded causal factors for what we see today. What is happening at the border is both a symptom and a long foreseeable consequence of US political action abroad and congressional inaction at home. The crisis is not an unmanageable storming of our country by invaders. The crisis is a lack of United States political and congressional leadership. The crisis we are facing is not because of the people who are seeking safety. It is because of the policies that are being imposed for political purposes, policies that not only are not aligned with gospel hospitality, but that intentionally do violence and cause pain to our most vulnerable sisters and brothers. In this context, for me, hospitality means faithfulness in small things. A glass of water as guests arrive, cutting off the classification bracelets from the maximum security prison detention centers to which people are welcomed by the United States. Choosing to stay present at the foot of the cross as people share their stories and insist on lifting their shirts to show me their physical wounds. Refusing to be paralyzed by anger and frustration at how little I can do, and yet how much there is to do. Praising God with people who, when they arrive, touch the statue of the Virgen de Guadalupe who accompanied them all along the way. Calling family members in other countries or other states to inform them that their loved ones are here, safe and out of prison. Yesterday, it meant waiting for an hour in an immigration office until the government employee chose to exercise her discretion and reschedule biometrics appointments for a family who desperately need to complete the process of requesting legal permission to work. Holding hands in a shelter and kitchen in a circle to pray before a meal, naming the sacredness of each one, and gratitude for the community of guests and volunteers that forms anew each day. and most importantly, hope, trusting in the inbreaking of God in the midst of it all. Personally, it is choosing to enter into the small acts of communion throughout each day that nourish me and empower me to keep showing up. Which reminds me of an excerpt of a favorite poem by John O'Donohue, and I'll close with this. We seldom notice how each day is a holy place, where the Eucharist of the ordinary happens, transforming our broken fragments into an eternal continuity that keeps us. Somewhere in us, a dignity presides that is more gracious than the smallness that fuels us with fear and force. A dignity that trusts the form a day takes. So at the close of this day, we give thanks for being betrothed to the unknown and for the secret work through which the mind of the day and the wisdom of the soul become one. Amen. And thank you.
Thank you, Sister Deirdre. Yes, let's give a virtual round of applause. It's beautiful sharing. So, Sister, again, thank you so much for sharing with us. We are grateful to learn about all the wonderful work that you do to accompany our migrant brothers and sisters. And please know that we hold you and your ministry and those your ministry partners in our prayers. So now we invite all of our participants to take a moment to reflect on Sister Deirdre's beautiful words and her story. We have 3 questions, which let me share on the screen. Nope. We have 3 questions for you to reflect on based on the sharing of Sister Deirdre. From what Sister Deirdre shared with us, what impacted you most? How would you react if faced with same circumstances? And what words would you offer to Deirdre? So we invite you, as you reflect on her words, on the sharing, to type your words in the chat. We will read a few out loud as time permits. But again, just based on these 3 questions on 1 or 2, let's go ahead and share those in the chat with the rest of the group. So we have our first comment. Thank you, Sister Deirdre, for being a witness to the plight of our immigrant brothers and sisters and being their voice. And I'd also like to echo that gratitude. Thank you for living the faithfulness of welcome. And again, feel free to share your response to any of these questions, or if you just want to share words of gratitude and affirmation, feel free to type that in the chat. Thank you, Sister Deirdre, for your beautiful and faithful witness with our brothers and sisters, immigrants. Thanks, Deirdre. I was very touched by the compassionate ways that you and the volunteers receive each person with dignity. Another message says, my deepest gratitude toward you for all the work you do accompanying our migrant brothers and sisters. There is so much that needs to be done and the few people willing to speak up for the voiceless. Blessings. What impacted me is the clear steps that have led to the conditions immigrants and those helping are facing. I was very touched by a gift of reaching out to family of the asylum families so that they know that they're safe with you at Annunciation. Was most impacted by the words Sister Deirdre said, migrants face the most violence in Mexico than in the Darien Gap. We need to change this aspect of our immigration policy as well as many others. Yes, yes. One more. Thank you for reminding us of the individuals who travel, not knowing what lies ahead, but have magnificent hope. And thanks, Deirdre, for sharing with us the depth of the human reality that you experience daily. Also, so glad you are our sister on the border. You bring hope to do many. So hard to hear about all that all are facing as they cross. And I was impacted the image of standing at the foot of the cross and being a witness to the trauma that every single migrant you encounter has endured. Yes. So all these comments, reflections that you've all shared, we will save it into a file and share it with Sister Deirdre so you can read them later on. And don't worry, if you're still reflecting on this, take your time. You can just put it in the chat. We'll make sure that Sister gets to see it. But we will continue with our public witness. Alice Soto, I believe you're up next with our actions.
This week, we are thankful to Sister Deirdre for providing 2 actions that we can take in support of our migrant sisters and brothers. First, find ways to provide hospitality in your own community. 2, tell your member of Congress to support H.R. 1325, Asylum Seeker Work Authorization Act of 2023. Under current federal law, asylum applicants are not eligible for a work permit until 180 days after they file for asylum. With the backlogs of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, this wait time is extended for months, up to a year. H.R. 1325 would direct the Secretary of Homeland Security to provide work permits to eligible asylum applicants 30 days after they file for asylum. An inability to work because of the very long waiting time makes asylum seekers vulnerable to exploitation and trafficking. By enabling asylum applicants to work in a timely manner, this alleviates their vulnerable financial situation, which allows them to provide for themselves and their families. Go to the link in the chat to contact your Congress member. Now I will pass it on to Alice for closing remarks.
Thank you, Alice. I'm Alice Ruffle, and I'm the legislative advocate for the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange Justice Center. Thank you for sharing this important action with us. I'd like to thank Sister Deirdre for sharing her story of hope and faith, and for being present to our dear neighbor at the border. I know that we all pray fervently that, especially with the new administration coming in January, that our congressional leaders may be transformed And for those who claim to be people of faith, that they embrace humanity and compassion and change the immigration system, especially with policies that keep them in Mexico and other aspects. On behalf of the Sisters of St. Joseph, we thank you all for joining us tonight to hear Sister Deirdre share her powerful story. As you may know, all registered participants will receive an email tomorrow with the link to today's recording and the information we shared today. We invite you to continue reflecting on what you can do to support our migrant brothers and sisters. And we urge you to share this recording with friends, family, colleagues, and urge them to take action as well. Before we say goodbye, you're invited to stay and join us in community for a few minutes to say hi. We hope to see you next week for our 4th virtual session. We'll hear from Sister Suzanne Jabro, a sister of St. Joseph of Carondelet. Sister Suzanne will share her experience in bringing people to be a prayerful presence to our brothers and sisters who live in a migrant shelter in Mexicali.